This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Evacuations are coming to a close in Afghanistan. We speak to one citizen who's fled Kabul. The UN says more than 82 million people have been forcibly displaced worldwide. And Egypt rolls out locally produced Vaxera Sinovac vaccine. Welcome to Africa Live on CGTN with me, Beatrice Marshall, in Nairobi. Also coming up on the program. In business news, Ethiopia's innovations and online services support $6 billion worth of trade. And in your sports, former Cameroon triple jump champion Francois Mbango aims to unearth a future sporting talent. We begin in Afghanistan, where the Taliban is reportedly waiting for the final nod to secure full control over Kabul's airport. The US has begun pulling out its troops just days before Tuesday's deadline for foreign forces to leave the country. The UK, France and Germany have wrapped up their evacuations. France and the UK say they will propose a UN-controlled safe zone in Kabul at an emergency UN meeting Monday to allow humanitarian operations to continue. Meanwhile, U.S. President Joe Biden has warned of another possible terrorist attack on the airport after the Pentagon killed two high-profile ISIS-K targets in a drone strike. This was in response to Thursday's bombing at the airport that killed 170 people, including 13 U.S. service members. Earlier, we spoke to Siyal Yousafi, a presenter for Shamshad Television in Kabul, on what the security situation at the airport looks like now.
The spokesman of Taliban, Zabiullah Mujahid, also confirmed to us that the three gates which were with Americans, they are hand over to Taliban. And now the Taliban are the responsible of the security situation in the Kabul airport. They confirmed and they assure us that the security will be very good in the airport, and we will see what will happen in the next few days. Are they able, or their capacity is that much that they will assure us that they will secure the airport? We don't know now. That we will wait for their confirmation. And the Zabiullah Mujahid, the spokesman of Taliban, confirmed and assured, but we don't know that they will secure the airport or not, because there are rumors and there are reports that the ISIS are planning to attack on Kabul airport again in a few hours or a few days. But the spokesman also confirmed that, assured that they will ready to respond to any attack by any group, and they will defeat this attack, and they will secure the airport.
Well, the August 31st deadline is approaching for U.S. troops to leave Afghanistan. Polls show many people in the U.S. disapprove of President Joe Biden's handling of the withdrawal. Toby Muse has more.
Most polls in the US do say that the most Americans support the US withdrawal from Afghanistan. But many polls are showing that most people are not approving of the way President Joe Biden has handled the withdrawal. A number of polls have shown around 25% say he's doing a good job in this term of evacuating the people from Afghanistan. Now, the media has really been ferocious in their attacks here in the US on Biden. They've questioned much of his handling. And this really, I think it's fair to say, is his first major crisis where he's facing criticism from really across the board. Now, interestingly, a number of soldiers who served in Afghanistan have also been vocal in their criticism of the president and the Department of Defense, the military's handling of this evacuation. They've said it's inconceivable that the military didn't have a better plan to get not only Americans, but also those Afghan allies out of the country. One Marine lieutenant colonel blasted Biden's actions in Afghanistan, said he was prepared to risk it all in his demand for accountability.
The reason people are so upset on social media right now is not because the Marine on the battlefield let someone down. People are upset because their senior leaders let them down. Did any of you throw your rank on the table and say, hey, it's a bad idea to evacuate Bagram Airfield, the strategic air base, before we evacuate everyone? Did anyone do that? And when you didn't think to do that, did anyone raise their hand and say, we completely messed this up? I want to say this very strongly. I have been fighting for 17 years. I am willing to throw it all away to say to my senior leaders, I demand accountability.
And I think it's important to note that the Marines revealed Saturday that Marine had lost his command due to posting that video.
The United Arab Emirates has taken in around 8,000 Afghans who fled Kabul since the Taliban returned to power. Milad Osmani used to work as a translator for the U.S. Embassy in Kabul. He spoke to CGTN in Abu Dhabi about his escape and his thoughts on how the U.S. handled the Taliban takeover.
The main problem, the main mistake, they are calculate that was wrong, that they calculate in 1 month, but Kabul fall in 2 days. Because of the rush of the people, a lot of people died there. You cannot take a pack with you. You should just force yourself to go inside. Just I took my phone and 1 clothes. Yeah. Yeah, we came like this. There is no luggage because we couldn't make that. With luggage, your chance to pass the gate, 0.
Milad says some of his counterparts in other embassies were told of rendezvous points and were also provided transportation inside the Kabul airport. However, he said he and his colleagues didn't receive any such notice. He said they had to carry their work badges and push through the crowds.
There is thousands of people. So you can, if you're strong, you can go inside. If you're not strong, you will be under the foot. So my brother and my brother and his wife, they couldn't make it to come inside. They are in Afghanistan right now, but their child is with me. He was unconscious because of the, because of the rash, because of the hot weather, and he's crying. People's crowd loud and voice. So because of that, I just gave it to the American army, and I go after him.
Before boarding the plane for the UAE, Milad said he and his family spent 4 nights on airport grounds and survived on military food supplies.
All people sit in plane, just 200 person space. They just put 400. Everyone's just sitting in the roof. Really exhausting. I was with the kid, and he's even now, while night he's sleeping, suddenly just waking up and crying because of the voice of the airport. He afraid a lot.
Milad says he remains worried about his friends and relatives in Afghanistan. He learned that 3 of them were killed in the suicide attacks outside Kabul airport 3 days ago. He says hundreds of former U.S. Embassy employees, including his brother, are still stuck in the country. Milad says he feels lucky, but hopes he could help those left behind once he's able to settle down.
I'm just wishing to reach fast to the America and settle, rest. Then I will start work, find some job, work, to support my family in Afghanistan.
As thousands of Afghans scramble to leave the country, they are adding to an already worrying global refugee crisis. According to the United Nations Refugee Agency, UNHCR, the number of forcibly displaced people in 2020 rose to a record high. CGTN's Daniel Arapmoy tells us more.
Despite the pandemic and calls for a global ceasefire, conflict has continued to displace thousands of people from their homes. The number of people fleeing wars, violence, persecution and human rights violations rose to 82.4 million globally in 2020. At the end of 2020, there were 48 million internally displaced people. UNHCR says there are now 26.4 million refugees globally, half of whom are children. Over 4 million people are asylum seekers. More than two-thirds of all people who fled abroad came from just 5 countries. The Syrian refugee crisis remains the world's largest. According to UNHCR, 6.7 million people are displaced within Syria. In Venezuela, over 4 million people have left their country due to violence and insecurity. Afghan refugees represent one of the world's largest protracted refugee populations. Insecurity and violence in many parts of the country has driven 2.6 million people from their homes. Over 2.2 million people have been forced to flee South Sudan following years of conflict. About 1.1 million people who identify as members of the Rohingya ethnic group have fled their homes in western Myanmar's Rakhine state. In Africa, Uganda is the largest refugee hosting country with approximately 1.4 million refugees. Most of the refugees are from South Sudan, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Burundi, and Somalia. For many of these refugees, resettlement is a crucial path to rebuilding their lives. Daniel Arap Moi, CGTN, Nairobi, Kenya.
Well, let's get more on that growing refugee crisis, and I'm joined by CGTN's Patrick Oyet. He's joining us from Juba. Deji Badmus is in Lagos, and Girum Chala is joining us from Addis Ababa in Ethiopia. Patrick, if I may start off with you, there are currently 4.3 million displaced people from South Sudan, including refugees and IDPs. What has been the major cause of this upset, and what is the current status in South Sudan? Well, Patrick, we'll return to you in a minute. Deji, let me get your view here, because the armed conflict in Nigeria has forced an estimated 2 million people to flee from their homes. What is the situation like now, and how is the government dealing with that?
The northeast of Nigeria, appreciable progress has been made. People are being resettled. They are being returned to their homes now, I mean their villages and communities, but of course you still have problems. There are still problems. Quite a lot of people are still displaced in the northeast of the country, but the state government there, especially in Borno State, which of course has been the epicenter of this crisis for the past 10 years, the state government there has made appreciable progress. Of course, you know, the level of violence there is gradually coming down, and as it comes down, what the state government is doing is to try and resettle people, take them away from IDP camps and resettle them to their original communities. Of course, the situation is still a bit volatile. It's not completely a settled situation there. But Nigeria as a whole, you still have problems elsewhere. For instance, while we're beginning to see a reduction in the crisis in the northeast, we're beginning to see an increase in herders farmers crisis, especially clashes now, especially in the middle belt of the country, the middle belt region, where quite a lot of people have been displaced recently as a result of fighting there, especially between herders and farmers. On the whole, what the Nigerian government is doing is that in 2019, the Nigerian government created the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs and Disaster Management. That ministry is actually leading Nigeria's humanitarian efforts now, the quest to resettle people and to provide assistance. This year alone, that ministry has a budget of about $146 million, and the ministry is working literally all over the place, providing humanitarian assistance and also leading in efforts to resettle people, especially in places where there's a semblance of peace. So that's essentially what the government is doing. And another commission in the Northeast, for instance, is what is called now called the Northeast Development Commission. This year alone, that commission has about $72 million to work with. So all of these efforts, the government hopes would help to resettle people and then reduce the number of displaced people, not just in the Northeast, but across the country.
Patrick in Juba, if you can hear me now, I do want to rephrase my question again, because there are currently 4.3 million displaced people from South Sudan, including refugees and IDPs. What is the current situation? And up to now, what has been the major cause of the refugee crisis in South Sudan?
Yeah, Beatrice, the problem in South Sudan is actually the problem of civil war, because civil war broke out in South Sudan in 2013, and this civil war went on for 6 years, and the peace deal was signed in 2018. But even if a peace deal was signed, still the implementation of the peace agreement is moving at a very, very slow pace. Up to now, that the government has been formed more than a year ago. The parliament has never sat to actually start working, telling you of how very many arms of the government are not yet operational, and therefore those who are still in the refugee camps are unwilling to come back home because they are not sure of the situation that is in the country. Leave alone that there is also another problem that has come related to climate change, where you find most parts, almost half of the country is flooding at the current time. Therefore, it does not provide any incentive for those in the refugee camps to return to their own home. But also talking more about the issue of the peace agreement, of course, the peace dividend is not there. The soldiers, for example, the opposition forces that were supposed to be joining the government forces and being redeployed together as one government force, these people are still in the training camps. They have not yet come out. So you have very many commanders in chief where the opposition groups still command their own troops. So it looks like the peace is not yet on the ground, especially in the villages. So it is not encouraging the people yet to return to their own homes. In fact, what is happening with the current flooding and so forth is that more people are even being displaced internally within the country.
All right, and I'm going to rope in Chris Ochamringa, joining us there from Kinshasa in DR Congo. Chris, more than 5 million people are internally displaced in DR Congo. Why is the country labeled one of the world's most neglected displacement crises?
Yes, Beatrice, first of all, the Democratic Republic of Congo was labeled the world's most neglected displacement crisis by the Norwegian Refugee Council. And that's a humanitarian organization that helps people who are living in conflict zones, people who have been displaced. Now, the reason they gave for that description was, first of all, the overwhelming numbers of people who have been displaced. Now, the DRC has, the eastern part of the DRC has a multiple number of conflicts in areas like North Kivu, Ituri, and South Kivu province. There are thousands of people, you know, who have been displaced in those areas. They have very little food, no shelter, and they are not, you know, getting the assistance that they need. So the humanitarian agencies said that was the first reason. The second was the lack of funding. There are a multiple number of aid organizations based in Eastern DRC that are trying to help the people displaced in Eastern DRC, get the basic necessities, but they've always been making these appeals to the international community, but the money that has been coming in has not been enough. According to a report that was released earlier this year, about half of the money that was requested to support people who have been forced to flee their homes was received, and so that was another reason. The other is also about the lack of media attention, especially in the international media outlets, that these crises in the DRC has not been receiving the same kind of attention that other crises elsewhere in the world has been receiving. And also the visits by high-profile officials from some of these big institutions in the Western world, it hasn't been happening in the DRC. So these are all the reasons that they have given. They're saying the DRC is a country that has had conflict for more than 2 decades, and there seems to be a kind of donor fatigue. People seem to have forgotten that the people here in this country still need support, and so the international humanitarian organizations have been appealing to the international community and the local people to do more to help the people here who have been displaced from their areas. Beatrice?
All right. And Girum, I want to hear from you. I do understand you're in Dubai for the moment, but the crisis unfolding in Ethiopia's Tigray region has seen more than 46,000 people seek refuge in neighboring Sudan and another estimated 1.7 million displaced from their homes. What are the major challenges facing refugees, and what is the government in Ethiopia doing to help?
Well, Beatrice, the fundamental problem Ethiopian IDPs, especially those in the northern part of the country, are facing with at the moment is insecurity. As you know, the war has continued in different war forms between the Amhara regional state in Tigray and the Afar regional state in Tigray. And by the day, the number of people who are being displaced from their homes looking for humanitarian assistance every day is increasing. And that is one problem. This also is in addition to the already existing trouble in those regional states. In the Tigray regional state itself, so many people, even before the war, were under humanitarian services due to the problem of climate and other issues. And now that the war is there, although food is being provided with its own limitations and others by UN and the government, there is also a problem of insecurity. People are fearing for their lives every day as war is also escalating in different parts of the country. The other most important thing, and to answer your second question of what the government is doing, is the government has a dedicated organization called the Disaster Risk Management Commission. The commission is mandated to address humanitarian issues in the country and more particularly provide food and other aid services across the country. And in the northern part of the country, and this is according to the Office of the Prime Minister, in collaboration with the United Nations, food is being provided. Trucks, more than perhaps 450 of them have crossed the border. So far, the government is trying to provide the food relief. But then again, there are limitations, and as long as the war is continuing, people will be continuing to suffer at the same time, Beatrice.
All right, Gerum Chala joining us there via Zoom from Dubai. Chris Ochamring in Kinshasa, Deji Badmus in Lagos, Nigeria, and Patrick joining us there from Juba. To you all, thank you. Now, this week, Egypt began rolling out its first locally produced COVID-19 vaccine. The jab is called Vasera Sinovac, carrying the name of the two manufacturers that collaborated in the production. China is supporting Egypt with a team of scientists to fully transfer the vaccine production technology. Here's Adel Mahroui with more details.
After getting the green light from the Egyptian Drug Authority on August 23, Vasera Sinovac COVID-19 vaccine is officially available this week in Egypt. Health Ministry officials announced receiving the first 1 million doses of the jab. These are among the first Egyptians nationwide to get the new vaccine.
I wasn't concerned at all. I know a lot of people who have taken the Chinese vaccines, and the reputation of the vaccines here is good. The government is widely publicizing this new vaccine, which shows its confidence in it. These millions of vaccines produced locally will help us go back to the normal life we know.
I'm the first person I know to take this kind of vaccine, so that made me worry a bit. There were doctors here, however, who patiently listened to all my questions. They have addressed all my concerns, and I felt comfortable taking it. I believe it's much better to have domestically manufactured vaccine. We save time, foreign currency, and solve the availability of the vaccines.
This is the product of the first Chinese vaccine manufacturing collaboration in Africa. Egypt says it has the capacity to produce up to 18 million doses monthly. This will comfortably cover domestic needs and fill the high vaccine gap demand in Africa.
Some people were concerned about getting vaccinated in general. That's not the case anymore. Even those who feared a shortage in supply may affect their second dosage, they are now confident the Egyptian Sinovac vaccine will be both effective and available.
Rolling out Egypt's first domestically produced COVID-19 vaccine comes at a time the country needs it the most. Cairo took a decision to inoculate some 5.5 million government and education employees in just 1 month. That's in addition to the ongoing vaccination campaign. 10 million Egyptians registered to get the jab. Of those, 8 million got at least one dose. 2.9 million residents have been fully vaccinated so far. Adel Mahroui, CGTN.
In Algeria, the World Health Organization said infections continue to surge, infections continue to surge in the United States, even as more people get vaccinated. Johns Hopkins' latest figures show 2,700 new deaths and over 247,000 new infections in the United States as of August the 27th. Several states are reporting record numbers of patients in hospitals. Nick Harper reports from Washington.
Well, the Delta variant is rampaging across the United States. Alabama is one state that is really struggling, saying that quite simply they have run out of room for bodies. They've brought in a few mobile refrigeration units to put the people who are dying as a result of COVID-19, but they're still struggling. And we're seeing that really across the majority of the southern states in the United States. Over the course of the last week, in particular, deaths from the Delta variant have increased dramatically. 14 states have seen a 50% increase. 28 other states have seen an increase of around 10%. Alabama is also one of the states that's seeing a rise of cases among children, something that we hadn't seen until recently with the Delta variant surging. Now, on top of that, we've had a study from the Lancet Infectious Disease Journal that looked particularly at how dangerous this Delta variant is. We already know that it's more transmissible, but they found in this study, looking at 40,000 cases, that people are twice as likely to be hospitalized if they get the Delta variant. And they said as a result of this, their conclusion was that it's very important for people to get vaccinated, because if they don't, they're more likely to be hospitalized, and that in turn will overwhelm hospital situations like we've seen in Alabama. They said it can lead to a higher burden on hospitals and healthcare if people don't get vaccinated. Well, to try and deal with the rising cases of the Delta variant across the US, the Biden administration is now looking at the possibility of introducing booster shots for people sooner than planned. The original date was 8 months after a second dose was given. They're now suggesting, comments from President Biden, that it could be as early as 5 months after that second dose. Boosters are due to start in the third week of September. The Biden administration making it very clear that they are worried as we head towards winter that we will see an increase of Delta variant cases of COVID-19 in the United States.
You're watching Africa Live, still ahead on the program. South Africa to get more drought, flooding and fires as climate change bites. And Libyans yearn for an end to daily power blackouts.
Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climates and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent to bring you the untold stories.
Let's have a look.
We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
Tunis, Cairo,
Cuba,
Johannesburg,
Ethiopia,
Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
To South Africa now, the country can expect increasing droughts, more flooding and even fire weather conditions as climate change continues to take hold of the region. That's according to the latest UN report on the physical science basis of climate change. According to the report, adverse climatic conditions are expected to negatively affect the planet, and some countries are already experiencing it. CGTN's Travers Andrews has more.
The new UN Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change report paints a very sobering picture on the current health of the planet. The report indicates global warming is more widespread and is intensifying, and will become more severe unless urgent action is taken. Southern Africa is particularly in the firing line and can expect increasing intensity in adverse climatic conditions.
The report finds is also likely to become generally drier
with more frequent droughts. And you see, when a region that is naturally dry and warm becomes drastically warmer with more droughts and drier on the average, there's very little one can do in terms of adaptation. So this region is limited in terms of its options to adapt to climate change.
Experts say the recent drought in the Western Cape has already shown the extent to which the climate is changing. The region can also expect more runaway bushfires and floods, which threatens food security and may trigger the displacement of communities. Cyclones are also another area of concern, as evidence point to this also becoming a problematic weather phenomenon for South Africa in the future.
Maybe for the first time in the historical record, Maputo in southern Mozambique, the capital, is vulnerable to the occurrence of these absolutely devastating types of cyclones. Now, even South Africa in the northeast, the Limpopo province of South Africa, the Mpumalanga province, all along the eastern escarpment, and even in our KwaZulu-Natal province further to the south, a critical harbour city like Richards Bay, is now suddenly vulnerable to the occurrence of these intense tropical cyclones.
South Africa's vulnerability to climate change makes the region particularly reliant on a global commitment to reduce global warming. Now, the future threat of severe drought remains one of the biggest areas of concern, as this has the potential to cause widespread damage to the economy and the country. Travis Andrews, CGTN, Cape Town.
Military commanders of the African Union mission in Somalia have agreed to speed up the implementation of joint operations with the Somalia National Army. The joint operations are meant to prepare the Somalia National Army to take over security responsibilities ahead of the end of AMISOM's mandate in December. CGTN's Daniel Arap-Moy reports.
The African Union mission in Somalia and the Somali security forces have pledged to intensify joint military operations. As part of their strategy, AMISOM has set up mobile and quick reaction forces within their areas of operations. This, they say, will help in countering the threat posed by Al-Shabaab militants.
I personally appreciate the enduring work you do in the sectors for the sake of peace and stability of this great country, Somalia. However, there is a need to generate a joint AMISOM SNA realistic, workable, and a fixed CONOPS, which calls for an appropriate threat assessment and an honest assessment of the friendly forces.
AMISOM commanders say Somalia needs trained forces capable of holding liberated territories. While Al-Shabaab remains a threat in Somalia, AMISOM says progress has been made.
Our mandate, sir, is to degrade Al-Shabaab, which we have done since we came into Somalia. We have secured population centers, and we continue to secure these population centers, give normalcy to those population centers for the Somali people to undertake their day-to-day activities without fear.
The commanders resolved to continue to help strengthen the Somali National Army and protect the civilian population. Meanwhile, the African Union and the Somali government have been discussing what AMISOM's involvement may look like beyond the end of its mandate on December 31st. Daniel Arap-Moy, CGTN, Nairobi, Kenya.
As a major oil exporter, Libya once had a strong electricity network, but years of conflict have destroyed much of the country's infrastructure and weakened many state institutions. Many Libyans face long hours of power blackouts, which have affected their daily life and businesses. CGTN's Nokutula Shabalala has more.
Walk down any commercial street in the Libyan capital, Tripoli. Generators lining the pavements have become an all too familiar sight in the city. The generators are ready to spring into action whenever there are power blackouts.
I am tired of the power cuts. I don't get any help from the government. We are tired of the power cuts. Mothers, fathers, families, everyone is tired. We are living in a big prison.
On most days, residents of Tripoli can expect multiple outages. Much to the citizens' frustrations, the power outages can last as long as 12 hours, affecting their daily life and business. Temperatures in Tripoli regularly reach 40 degrees Celsius, especially in the summer.
We are suffering due to the power cuts in the country. Most of the goods and products we sell require refrigeration, which requires electricity. The chicken and ice cream are going bad because of lack of electricity. The power cuts are affecting us on a psychological level now.
Basic generators sell for around $470, but more reliable models cost thousands. Keeping the generators fueled up has become a daily chore for many. Some worry that the hum of the generators and the diesel fumes could cause health problems.
This crisis has lasted for 10 years, and we are now in the 11th year. It has a great impact on our lives.
After the 2011 revolution, Libya has had repeated outbreaks of fighting. This has caused heavy damage to the country's power distribution network. Libya has not had any new investment in electricity generation in recent years.
This crisis has been going on for 10 years in Libya. Nothing has changed. The promises made by successive governments have not been kept.
2 new power stations are under construction by a German-Turkish consortium in Tripoli and in Libya's third city of Misrata. They are expected to add 1,300 megawatts of capacity to the grid in the first quarter of next year. Noktula Shabalala, CGTN.
Some stormy news now, and before heading to the U.S., Ida slammed into Cuba on Friday, toppling trees and damaging homes. Luis Chirino reports from Havana.
Hurricane Ida made landfall Friday afternoon on Cuba's Isle of Youth, battering the western part of the country. On Saturday, preliminary reports say Hurricane Ida's impact on the island left fallen trees and damaged home roofs. Local media reports also say the storm caused damage to agricultural crops and the national grid in the province of Pinar del Rio, leaving people without electricity. Thousands of people were evacuated from low-lying areas to safe shelters. So far, no casualties were reported on the island. On the Isle of Youth, the storm left a trail of fallen trees, as well as in Pinar del Rio and Artemisa provinces, while in Havana, rain and wind gusts left some damage in the power and water supply systems. The strong hurricane hit the island just as Cuban citizens are under COVID-19 restrictive measures, so crucial medical supplies were transferred from warehouses to hospitals ahead of the storm. Health centers were not damaged by the storm, according to local media reports. Hurricane Ida left the island late Friday and headed to the Gulf of Mexico. Meanwhile, on Saturday, Cubans began recovery efforts, assessing and cleaning the damage left by the storm. Luis Chirino, CGTN, Havana.
And your business news coming up next. Here's what's ahead. Innovations and online services support $6 billion worth of trade in Ethiopia. And South African Airways set to resume operations from the 23rd of September.
The best of Mother Nature, near the heart of Mother Africa. The scenery and allures of Victoria Falls, where the sun rays kiss the sprinkles of magnificent waters cascading upon the rocks. The wonders of Kenya's Masai Mara, where the world comes to feast upon the beauty of the beasts. The Lake Nakuru in Kenya, where flamingos come in the millions to rest their wings. Catch it here on our special series on Africa's famous national parks.
Look, it's a small herd of elephants.
Ethiopia has said the value of its e-commerce market reached over $6 billion in the past financial year. The growth has mainly been spurred by innovations that have managed to easily tap into a ready market for online services. The country's potential is, however, held back by several factors, including a lack of trust in the cashless system by some citizens. CGTN's Coletta Wanjohi reports from Addis Ababa.
Marlet Fekade has just received a package that she ordered for online.
Shega is very convenient for me. I can get things from online and I can get it delivered here where I am.
Marlet used Shega, one of the many platforms that have come up to tap into Ethiopia's e-commerce market. Its manager, Chris Rumenda, has had vast experience from neighboring Kenya, which has one of the largest e-commerce industries in Africa.
If an investor is patient, Ethiopia is even more ripe than Kenya in terms of everything. Because looking at, their vendors are quite organized. Locations, infrastructure, and everything is very organized. Regulation and everything is very clear, even if it's not there. But when it's there, it's very clear. So this is something that will make it easy for everyone.
In just a year, the platform, which targets mostly small enterprises, has registered over 7,000 sellers with over 10,000 products.
There is e-commerce in Ethiopia at a growth scale, but it's kind of informal. So a lot of Ethiopians are buying things on Telegram. So for us, what we are doing is just shifting them from Telegram into a formalized e-commerce system. And if you use that type of people, they actually adopt it easier because it's easier to trust a platform that is known than buying directly from an individual.
The government of Ethiopia is looking to these digital platforms to create jobs. Ethiopia's Job Commission says over 2 million people enter the job market annually.
No government agency is supposed to create job creation, right? It's supposed to create opportunities, right? And create the level playing field, etc., etc. But technology, number one, gives you that inflection point, right? And it gives you that accelerating factor.
Consistent internet supply remains a challenge, and the lack of it in rural areas makes these e-platforms only available in urban areas. But with the opening up of the country's telecom sector, there is hope. A consortium led by Kenya's telecom giant Safaricom is already setting operations here, and a separate sale of about 40% of Ethiopia's telecom company, Ethio Telecom, is underway. A digitization proclamation passed by the parliament recently targets to open up support to ensure innovations prosper to sustainable businesses. And Shega is looking at tapping into this opportunity to expand to have specific e-services targeting women entrepreneurs and farmers. Coletta Njohi, CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
Grounded national airline South African Airways has confirmed that it will be back in the skies, servicing the Johannesburg-Cape Town route in 5 continental African destinations from September the 23rd. Angelo Coppola has the story.
SAA has been grounded since March last year, when the country went into a COVID-19 hard lockdown. The announcement comes ahead of the completion of a due diligence of the airline by a prospective buyer, the Tekatsu Consortium.
Before the due diligence was completed, it seemed particularly inexplicable that they were going to paint themselves into a corner by announcing a start date, because if they're then compelled to start, essentially they're using a lot of global airlines resources, which is part of the Takata Consortium, then the consortium would probably be able to pretty much dictate the terms of the strategic equity partnership.
Some questions have been raised about SAA entering the highly competitive passenger segment, when initial indications were that they would restart operations in the cargo sector first.
We've now got Comair back in the market with its BA and Kulula brands, so there's enormous oversupply in the domestic passenger market and even in the regional market, with Airlink having stepped in and eaten up a lot of the routes that were being operated by SA Express and will now be operated by SAA. The only routes that may work for SAA would seem to be the Accra route and the Kinshasa route, as they don't have immediate competition on those.
Concerns have been raised about the airline's current business plan developed by the business rescue practitioners.
And honestly, the numbers are appalling. The original business rescue plan was completely unrealistic when it was calling for a break-even with loads in the order of 60%. Now, no airline really can survive with 60% loads these days. You need to be looking at 70% as a minimum, more commonly 75%. The new numbers are indicating that the business plan is in fact suggesting a 25% load factor. And that just means that the airline is going to be hemorrhaging cash at an absolutely extraordinary rate.
It's been a long time coming, but SAA is finally going to get off the ground, and hopefully it'll be sustainable and stay off the ground. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Tunisia's inflation rate rose to 6.4% in July from 5.7% last month and 5% in the 2 months before. The country's statistics agency attributes the increase to a jump in food prices, which rose 8% during the month. CGTN's Adnan Chauchi has more from Tunis.
Tunisia has recorded a jump in inflation over the last few months as prices of food products continue to rise. In a bid to rein in on the surge, the country's president Kais Saied has urged the trade minister and officials in the trade department to put an end to monopoly and speculation and attempt to control the prices of goods and commodities in the North African state.
I urge you to be firm in enforcing the law, especially with the criminals who want to starve the population and make people's lives harder. The prices of the food products should be halved, but they're skyrocketing.
Despite the president's call, the prices of fruits, vegetables, meat, fish and all basic products are creeping higher. Many Tunisians are complaining about their weak purchasing power.
All food products are more expensive each month while our purchasing power is weak. Food store vendors have not listened to the president. Fruits and vegetables used to be cheap in summer. Now we are paying more and getting less in terms of quantity and quality. The middle class and the poor as well as retired people are impoverished citizens who cannot fill the food basket. One can no longer make ends meet. This is unacceptable because the state is absent.
The Tunisian Consumers Organization revealed that grocery bills are also soaring in the North African country. Consumer protection groups assert that the cost of food have risen at their fastest pace in 5 years due to the monopoly of some private hypermarkets over the food distribution channels.
The prices of products are 60% higher than their real value because hypermarkets and wholesalers control the production and distribution. That's how they control prices. The solution is in the social and solidarity economy. The state needs to create more consumer producer markets where the prices and the profit margins are determined and affordable for the population.
President Saied described the food distribution channels in Tunisia as starving channels and has blamed corruption lobbies for the rising inflation curve. Experts say the Trade Department needs to hire more than 2,000 additional economic control agents to help authorities contain the surge. According to the National Institute of Statistics, the prices for most goods and services not only rose but accelerated, making the cost of living more expensive in Tunisia. Economists assert that this phenomenon is shrinking the purchasing power of Tunisians as well as their savings. Adnan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
And your sports news coming up next. Here's what's ahead. Former Cameroon triple jump champion Francois Mbango aims to unearth a future sporting talent.
How would you create your legend? On the fields, on the tracks, in the arenas of Africa. Were you born to be a player? Could this moment be yours? Sports Scene. Find your game.
In Cameroon, the Athens 2004 and Beijing 2008 Olympic women's triple jump gold medalist Francois Mbango has opened an institute for sport and physical education to train athletes from across Africa. Mbango hopes the institute will be a breeding ground for future Olympic champions, as CGTN's Daniel Arap Moy tells us.
Located in the Ala district of the Cameroonian capital of Yaoundé, the Francois Mbango Institute offers vocational training in the science and physical activities in sport. To enroll in the institute, learners will have to pay an equivalent of $728. The Athens 2004 and Beijing 2008 gold winner hopes the facility will grow to be a center of sporting excellence in Africa.
We offer several courses. Among them, there is what we call STAPS. In this field, we have several branches, namely sports training and physical and sports education. We also have the management course, which includes sports administration and sports events. We train trainers because there are really no specialized schools here, although the need is real. For this first academic year, we have about 40 students enrolled in our different programs, but most of them are in the sports management program.
Mbango is a sporting legend in her native Cameroon despite transferring her allegiance to France from 2010. She's the only athlete in the country's history, male or female, to win gold at successive Olympics following her success in the women's triple jump at the Athens 2004 and Beijing 2007 Games. Mbango holds the Olympics record of 15.39 meters, won 7 gold, 9 silver and 2 bronze medals at the Olympics, World Championships and Commonwealth Games.
I have 15 years of experience at the highest level in athletics. I wanted to leave a legacy to the youth and the possibility to all those who practice high-level sport to have a professional retraining. I also want to put all the experience I have gained during my career at the service of young people through training and education.
The Olympic champion believes there is potential in Cameroon to produce more champion athletes. This is a task she has resolved to take up in her retirement.
Our challenge is to train the best managers, the best administrators in the field of sports for a good management of our infrastructures. Because there are now here several that meet international standards. There must be people capable of managing these infrastructures, but also of organizing major sporting events.
The first 40 students enrolled at the Francois Mbango Institute will be trained for 2 years. At the end of the training, students will be able to work as physical and sports education teachers, club coaches, sports center managers, and high-level athlete fitness trainers, among other fields. Daniel Arap Moy, CGTN.
Well, let's turn to the English Premier League, where Chelsea held out with a 10